Greetings, fellow humans, and welcome to the Renaissance Yorkshireman podcast. Today, and indeed every day this week, I'm going to make videos about the World Economic Forum. If you've never heard of the World Economic Forum, they're sometimes known as the Davos Group because they normally meet in Davos in Switzerland. Now, as it happens with the global pandemic, they are meeting online, but they are still associated with this town of Davos in Switzerland. If you go to their website, you'll find lots of documents, such as this. Why we need the Davos Manifesto for a better kind of capitalism. These kind of documents are very interesting. At university, I used to study a lot of these kind of documents. They're very interesting, not only for what they say, but also for what they don't say. So what is implicit as well as what is explicit in these documents. So let's dive in. Here's how they begin. What kind of capitalism do we want? That may be the defining question of our era. If we want to sustain our economic system for future generations, we must answer it correctly. Well, it's very interesting the way they start. So first of all, they're wording it as if there is no alternative to capitalism. Well, either they haven't done much reading or they're a bunch of liars and bullshitters. I'm going with option 2 on that one. There are alternatives to capitalism, such as my book there, The Tao of Sustainable Development, or Kate Raworth's absolutely superlative book, Donut Economics, which I say is a bloody masterpiece of economic writing. And also Game B. If you go on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube and put in Game B, you will come up with lots and lots and lots of alternative ideas to the current Game A model of capitalism. They continue. Generally speaking, we have 3 models to choose from. The first is shareholder capitalism. The second is stakeholder capitalism. But compared to these 2 options, the third has the most to recommend it. Stakeholder capitalism. Dun dun dun. And they go on to say, shareholder capitalism, currently the dominant model, first gained ground in the United States in the 1970s, blah, 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 blah. And they go on to say, many realise that this form of capitalism is no longer sustainable. The question is, why have attitudes begun to only change now? What? Why have attitudes only begun to change now? Well, this just goes to show the mindset of this banker and economist class. I mean, they're living in a fantasy land. Attitudes about this have been changing since before the Second World War. Of course, their model has been the dominant model, but there have been plenty of alternatives. Socialism, anarchism, and what's coming now, Game B, post-capitalism. So this question, why have attitudes begun to change only now, just shows how delusional their thinking is. These people, their version of capitalism, it's Harry Potter capitalism. Absolute fantasists, the lot of them, bullshitters. They go on to say, one likely reason is the Greta Thunberg effect. Great. They are now co-opting Greta Thunberg. So, I've never met Greta Thunberg. I don't know how she arrives at her ideas. I don't know who advises her. But my message is to Greta Thunberg, or indeed any young people who are watching this video, don't be conned by the World Economic Forum. They're saying there is no alternative to capitalism. They are liars. Liars, bullshitters and fantasists. So go and look for these alternatives because they do exist. They go on to say, the current economic system represents a betrayal of future generations owing to its environmental unsustainability. Yes, they're right. But that unsustainable model, which is threatening future generations, is capitalism. So capitalism has made the problem, and they're saying the answer is a new and slightly fluffier kind of capitalism. Bullshit. Absolute nonsense. Drivel. And I'd like to quote Albert Einstein to support my accusations of bullshit and drivel and fantasy. Albert Einstein once said, "We can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them." I rest my case on that one. They go on in this vein. Another reason is that millennials and Generation Z no longer want to work for or invest in or buy from companies that lack values beyond maximising shareholder values. Well, yeah, that's true enough. And finally, they say, executives and investors have started to recognise their own long-term success is closely linked to that of their customers, employees and suppliers. Yeah, kind of. In an abstract way, they recognise it. This change in direction is long overdue. Yeah, it is, but not the change that you're talking about. They go on to say, we should seize this moment to ensure that stakeholder capitalism remains the new dominant model. That is a threat. What they are saying is that we as a class of bankers and economists, we want to live a life where we're stinking rich and get to do what we like. The rest of you peasants and plebs and proles, you do what you're told. You have no alternative. These are the only options. You don't want planet Earth to be destroyed. They go on to say, but to uphold the principles of stakeholder capitalism, companies will need new metrics. A new measure of shared value creation should include environmental, social and governance goals. Blah, 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 blah. Greenwashing. We've seen it before. You don't know what greenwashing is, go and Google it. The second net metric that needs to be adjusted is executive remuneration. Since the 1970s, executive pay has skyrocketed, blah, 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 blah. So they're kind of touching on people's concerns, but they're not addressing it in any meaningful manner. They're not talking about the 5 capitals framework and the way that they value financial capital over natural capital and human capital and social capital. And if you don't know what those things are, go and watch my video on the 5 capitals framework. Finally, they say, large companies should understand that they themselves are major stakeholders in our common future. Yeah, they should, but they don't. And one of the reasons for this is the prevalence of psychopathy and narcissism within the ruling class, and the dark triad of psychopathy, narcissism and Machiavellianism in the ruling class. But it's also a case that these people are essentially addicted to power and money. So we can't really understand their actions outside the prism of addiction. But as soon as you understand that they are addicted to power and money in the same way that a heroin addict is addicted to heroin, then their delusional actions become quite understandable. I'm coming to the end of the document now, and they say, is there any other way? Well, of course there is. Post-capitalism game B. And then they say at the end, business leaders now have an incredible opportunity. By giving stakeholder capitalism concrete meaning, they can move beyond their legal obligations and uphold their duty to society. They can bring the world closer to achieving shared goals, such as those outlined in the Paris Climate Agreement and the United Nations Sustainable Development Agenda. If they really want to leave their mark on the world, there is no alternative. Lies, 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 liar, liar, your pants on fire. The World Economic Forum are a bunch of bullshitters, liars, chancers and fantasists. I mean, let's just say it how it is. Some of the things that they do not say in this document, as I've already stated, the 5 capitals framework, they also say nothing about psychopathic and narcissistic traits within systems, which is a thing, you know what I mean? It's not just some kind of fantasy that I've made up. But also, there is no mention of the arms trade. So as far as they're concerned, the arms trade can just go on doing what they like. They can sell Kalashnikovs, Stinger missiles, tanks, torture equipment. As far as the World Economic Forum are concerned, this is a reasonable way to do business. Now, if they thought otherwise, they would say in these documents, but they never do. They never address the global arms trade and the military-industrial complex, because the people who are in the global arms industry and the military-industrial complex are good buddies and move in the same circle as these people from the World Economic Forum. So, just a few final points before I end. My book is available on Amazon, and yes, I am aware of the irony of selling my book on a predatory capitalist company about overthrowing predatory capitalist company, but then the world is full of irony. And my last thing I would like to do is tell a joke. Why can't you buy green paint in a hardware store in Davos? Because the World Economic Forum have used it all for greenwashing capitalism. Not a great joke, I know, but I have yet to hear a joke on the World Economic Forum or Davos, so as far as I'm concerned, I've made up the first joke about Davos. Thank you for giving me your time today. Live long and prosper. Nanu nanu. Shazbot.